behalf of the family of Arnold Jacobs and all those who had the privilege and pleasure of working with him, whether at Northwestern University or at the Chicago Symphony Orchestra or any one of the many, many other places he taught, I want to welcome you all to this tribute to a remarkable life. And I want to extend a special welcome to the members of the Midwest Band and Orchestra Clinic, who I know make up a significant portion of the audience. The members of Arnold's immediate family are with us this afternoon, sitting on the box level. I welcome them, and we all pay you our respects. They chose not to speak today because it would be too difficult for them, but they asked that I begin by reading a portion of a prayer that was read at a small family final viewing. It was written by Alva Guntner, a friend of Gisela Jacobs for 77 years. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whomever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. I think that the first prayer that many of us learned as children was, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. I know for a fact that Arnold's soul left his body and went to be with Jesus. We know that now he can see and he can get around without his cane or wheelchair. He's playing his tuba in God's heavenly orchestra and telling all the others how to breathe right. I'm sure there are plenty up there who never had the opportunity before to take a lesson from him. Arnold, Ms. Guntner went on in her remarks, Arnold was a very special person who will be remembered all over the world. Those of us who were privileged to know him personally have always considered it an honor. He was not just famous as a tuba player and a teacher, he was a friend and a kind and generous individual. Last Easter, when he and Gisela were at my daughter's for dinner, I remember him saying that he didn't have anything to show for all his years of working. I reminded him that he had taken care of his father, Gisela's mom, his sister, and his brother, and God only knows how many others. I told him he had stored up treasures in heaven. A truer Christian I shall never know. God gave Arnold a special talent, and he gave it away as long as he had the breath to do so. He will live forever in the memories of all of his students and friends that came to know him. Remembering and sharing these memories with one another will help to heal the broken hearts of all of us who loved him dearly just for being Arnold. I would like to inform you all that there are memory books located in the lobby off the main floor for you to enter your thoughts and reflections. These will be given to the family. Also, there will be a reception after this tribute on the first 2 floors of the rotunda of Symphony Center. The rotunda is in that direction, and staff will be available to point the way. The Jacobs family will be present. There will be memory books there as well, and there is a display commemorating the life and career of Arnold Jacobs. You will note that we have chosen the word tribute to describe today's occasion. That is not an accident. A good deal of thought went into it. The family and we felt that this was not a memorial service. It is a tribute to a great man and a celebration of that man's life and career. At occasions of this nature, there's always a question that people in attendance have: am I supposed to applaud after a musical performance? I spoke this morning with Gisela Jacobs, and she felt and I felt that the answer was yes. Jake would not understand performers not being recognized and applauded, and therefore we urge you to express your appreciation to the musical performers today. Finally, a personal word. I came to the Chicago Symphony Orchestra in 1985, and so I was only here for the last 3 years of Arnold Jacobs' remarkable tenure. But I long knew his playing from concerts and from records, and his reputation as a teacher. I feel privileged to have even been able to experience those 3 short years. I had never thought of the tuba as a bel canto instrument until I started regularly hearing Jake play. Now I know its possibilities. And on top of that, I had the pleasure of knowing the man. Generous, warm, caring, passionately committed to music, sensitive, witty, all of the things that made him a unique colleague. If one's goal in life is to make a difference, I can assure you Arnold Jacobs made a difference. The institution and the people who crossed his path were far better off for having done so.
There exists a special bond between the bass trombone and tuba players of an orchestra. This is not only because they sit next to one another, but because they collaborate in providing the all-important bass line for the brass section and for the entire orchestra in conjunction with the timpani and the lowest instruments of the string and woodwind sections. They work closely together, practicing the critical octaves and unisons for perfect intonation and proper balance so that their beloved art, music, may be served in the best possible way. From 1945 to 1985, Ed Kleinhammer and Arnold Jacobs together did just that. The wonderful results of their labors can be heard on the many excellent recordings made during that period. It was a team effort still remembered with reverence. Ed Kleinhammer, now enjoying his retirement in northern Wisconsin, is unable to be here this evening, but he asked me to read the following letter at this special celebration of Arnold's life. For over 40 years, it was my great fortune that Arnold and I were colleagues. Every day, I was in awe and humbleness of his great musicianship, his big daddy sound, and his ability to make a simple scale sound like a concerto. Arnold was a great inspiration to me day after day. Countless are the times that I had a keyhole peek into heaven playing next to Arnold in a world-class orchestra. And countless are the teachings I learned from him in so doing. We had a great understanding and respect between us. To Gisela and Dallas and friends of Arnold, I send my deepest sympathy and conclude with a few lines by Emily Dickinson. This world is not conclusion. A sequel stands beyond, invisible as music, but positive as sound. Amen.
Good evening to all of my family, which is what we call a gathering like this. We're all here to really celebrate a very special person in a very special life. And I would say that my sentiments echo very much the remarks that have already been made by Mr. Fogel and the letter from Ed Kleinhammer. It was a great experience to have a colleague like Jake. We enjoyed so many things together, musical things, personal things, social things, shared a lot of experiences, even a sip or two. And I only want to say, especially to Gisela and Dallas, it was a pleasure and a privilege to know him and work with him, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. Thank you.
What a remarkable evening. Gisela, Dallas, Dorothy, other members of the Jacobs family, President Henry Fogel, Bernard Dobroski, members of the orchestra, colleagues, and friends. Arnold Jacobs was a man of the highest integrity in all facets of his very active and admirable life. He was a husband. He was a father, a friend, and a treasured colleague. He was a mentor to those many who benefited from his enormous talents as a musician and as a teacher. My first contact with Arnold was in August 1950. I called to request his recommendation of someone to replace me with the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus Band. William Bell had invited me to study at the Juilliard School in New York. Arnold immediately recommended Harold Mack MacDonald. Mack finished that circus season and later joined the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra. Every time I performed in Chicago, Arnold was always there, whether it was ballet, brass quintet, Sauter Finnegan, or other ensemble. His interests and expertise crossed all music disciplines. We had many opportunities for conversation over drinks and or dinner. I was always impressed with the depth of Arnold's knowledge and his willingness to share it. For he had in abundance the most precious asset of any teacher, inspiration. Arnold was an inspiration to all who knew him, who worked with him, who studied with him. During the summer of 1963, I had a dream relationship with my two tuba heroes of this century, William Bell and Arnold Jacobs. The three of us served as faculty for the Gunnison Music Camp. We were the tuba section for the Gunnison Music Camp Director's Band. And on the final concert of the summer, our tuba trio performed and recorded in unison Paganini's Perpetual Motion with band accompaniment. The mutual admiration, the camaraderie, and the countless social gatherings with Bill Bell and Adgie, Arnold and Gizzy, provided Carol and me with the most enjoyable summer of our lives. Into the next millennium, ad infinitum, Arnold Jacobs will stand as an icon of music pedagogy for all teachers and performers of vocal, wind, and brass instruments. As an orchestral tubist, he was uniquely gifted master. His orchestral performances set ever higher standards for others to emulate and aspire to equal. His interpretations were definitive. As a master teacher, I believe it can be said that Arnold Jacobs never met a musician he couldn't improve. His teaching and personal example inspired a better understanding of themselves, their art, and their instruments. He provided logical comprehension and artistic application of his wind and song philosophy and pedagogy. But oftentimes, his greatest and most lasting gifts to friends, colleagues, and students were positive changes in attitude and commitment. With knowledge, wisdom, patience, love, and understanding, Arnold Jacobs infused desire for self-improvement, purpose, and fulfillment into the lives of all who sought his counsel. Through his students and the new ones they will inspire, Arnold Jacobs will live forever.
Ladies and gentlemen, I consider it a privilege to be speaking to you today about Arnold Jacobs. A little over 54 years ago, a young man walked onto this very stage and, along with his colleagues here, began to forge an orchestral brass section that, at least in terms of reputation, was to have no equal anywhere at any other time. To have been an original member as well as the foundation of such an august team would have been quite a career in itself. To have concurrently been a music teacher who revolutionized the concepts and applications of wind instrument playing and instruction would have been another worthy career. Between these two roles that he alone effectively mastered, he positively affected millions of people. This is testament to the difference one person can make. It was an overflowing and ever-flowing life. These extraordinary accomplishments of Arnold Jacobs, however, are all secondary to something else. The way he chose to lead his life is, for me, most worth studying and emulating. He had the intelligence, he had the talent. As a young person, he seemed to have the emotional and financial support of his parents, especially through the hard times of the Depression. All of these positive influences would not have made him a success unless he chose to strive to develop that intelligence, that he chose to develop that talent, that he chose to act on curiosity that he had for the production of sounds on wind instruments. In the end, that he chose to make a difference. If we're to celebrate Arnold Jacobs' life, I suggest that there are things we can remember about the decisions he made in his life that, if we choose to, may make a difference in the lives we lead and the lives we influence as performers, music teachers, human beings, and family members. In his journey through life, he believed in eliminating complexity by keeping things simple and childlike. His curiosity in the process of wind playing led him to choose to study the subject soon after he, Gisela, and Dallas moved to Chicago. He took up the subject with zest and eventually discovered some basic tenets of wind playing that were very simple concepts. Jake did not choose to disrupt outmoded playing concepts or to bring undue attention to himself. The only thing he chose to do was to act on his curiosity. The way he chose to teach this material is also worth examining. Although he would teach the subject through instruction and by example, he never forgot that he was not so much teaching the subject as he was teaching the student. To this degree, I do not know if he realized how much of a surrogate parent he was to players who came to see him. I get the feeling that some people came to him with their playing problems because he would be the only person who would believe in them and give them the instructions needed, but most importantly, the hope they needed to solve problems. If as teachers we could give students hope, along with the solutions for problems, how much more affirming to the human spirit that would be. The old adage, "I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care," is an apt one. With the myriad of good opportunities that came to him, he chose to say no to some very good things so he could say yes to the best ones. He may have chosen to not attend an after-concert reception so that he could help a trombone player with high-range difficulties. He may have chosen to not be in attendance at an orchestra members' meeting so he could walk down the street to his studio in the Fine Arts Building to help a young Swedish trumpet player from losing his job due to a debilitating playing problem. He may have chosen to not answer many letters or write down his theories regarding wind playing or even take an afternoon nap on a difficult tour. But it always seemed to be because he chose to do something else that was going to make a more positive difference to another player, another friend, another colleague, or most importantly, his family. Probably the most important lesson he taught me was how much he loved doing exactly what he was doing at the moment. When he was on stage, he loved to perform. When he was teaching, he was with the student the entire distance. The slides you will soon be viewing reflect a person who is seemingly at peace with himself, simply enjoying life as it unfolded. When you see him as a child or as a young man or even early on in his career, the twinkle in his eyes was not for knowing what he was going to discover or the bounds he would break with those discoveries. It was for knowing that something exciting and positive was going to happen. Even towards the end, when his eyes were failing him and his legs were refusing to walk, his attitude was always positive. No matter what he was struggling with physically, he always seemed to be able to smile. And nobody did that better. I will always remember the graciousness with which he welcomed me to his chair on this stage that he vacated less than 10 years ago. His helpfulness and availability while I was getting my footing here was welcome. Once settled, he offered advice, and his counsel was particularly welcome when it came along to dealing with some of the human issues which occasionally invade life in this space. I cannot think of many persons who would wish success on people and encourage them to expand on their successes as much as he did. I cannot think of many persons who included so many people as friends and yet was always happy in finding new ones. A great French philosopher once said, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." Knowing Arnold Jacobs as I did makes me believe this statement, for although he did not strike me as an overtly religious person, he was definitely one with spirit and benevolence. For me, his life resonates with the reality that we were in the presence of a very special person, a very special mentor, and personally, I am ever so lucky to have experienced one of the great human beings of the ages.
Arnold Jacobs was the greatest teacher of any subject whom I have known. Arnold Jacobs was also the finest tuba player I have known. To achieve such greatness and excellence in two separate fields, teaching and playing, however closely related, is indeed rare and perhaps unprecedented. Mr. Jacobs was a tremendous teacher for many reasons, but mainly because he had an absolute mastery of three subjects: physiology, psychology, and musicianship. His command of each of these three subjects was so complete that they blended together to form his own pedagogy. He developed an entirely new way of teaching the brass instruments. Most people teach the way they themselves have been taught. Arnold Jacobs was largely self-taught, and this gave him the freedom to develop a new pedagogy based on how to sound and not based on how to play. Imitation is an extremely efficient way to learn, and a tuba lesson with Arnold Jacobs included a lot of it. This was a particularly natural way for him to teach, since he was such a master of his instrument. My greatest inspiration as a player comes from remembering his tone quality. From my very first lesson with him 20 years ago in the Fine Arts Building, in a studio many of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with. He had the most crystalline clarity to his tone, and the first time I heard it, I knew I had heard the most beautiful sound in the world. I can still hear those few notes, as if he had just played them for me this morning. Arnold Jacobs had a tremendous influence on my playing, my teaching, my career, and my life. He was not just my mentor, but my friend, my colleague, my inspiration, and my role model. Without a doubt, Mr. Jacobs had the greatest impact on my life of anybody I have come in contact with. I know that he influenced not only my generation and generations before mine. I also know that he will leave his mark on generations after mine, because he taught so many people who now teach his concepts for him. Scores of players and teachers around the world have been and will continue to be positively influenced by Arnold Jacobs. I would like to read to you a poem that Mike Parker, a senior student of mine at Northwestern University, wrote upon the news that Mr. Jacobs had died. Yesterday, Arnold Jacobs stopped breathing, and some might say that he has passed on. But today I heard him singing. He is still here. He lives in our song.
During his over 45 years on the faculty of Northwestern University School of Music, Arnold Jacobs was responsible for influencing the lives of thousands of our students, regardless of their instrumental or vocal specialization. I'm proud to be one of Jake's students. Mr. Jacobs was my teacher. Mr. Jacobs had a major influence on developing my competence as a musician and tubist. But most importantly, Mr. Jacobs had a major influence on my life. Yes, he was my teacher, but he was also my friend. As I stand here on the stage of this newly renovated Symphony Center, I can still feel the spirit of Arnold Jacobs. He may have left us, but I can actually still hear his sound in my inner ear. Can you hear that sound? The composer could be Berlioz, Tchaikovsky, or Strauss, but it was Jake who provided the acoustic foundation for that legendary Chicago Symphony sound. Even in silence, if you listen carefully, you can still hear the sound today. It will forever resonate in the sonic environment of this wonderful space. In fact, if you try hard enough, I'm sure you can even see him here on the stage, even today. We're waiting for the beginning of a performance of the Verdi Requiem. The stage and backstage risers are crowded with instrumentalists and vocalists. Arnold is now just entering upstage left, instrument in hand, ready to perform. He takes a seat right back there, patiently awaiting for the moment. Like many of you, my eyes were always diverted to Jake when he walked onto the stage or just before he was ready to perform. Finally, we watch him lift his beautiful silver-plated York piston valve tuba from the stage floor. He embraces it like a friend, and as his mouthpiece settles into place, the moment arrives for Dies Irae. While the brasses in the chorus and the basses in the chorus sing in ancient Latin, Tu babirum spada sonum, the audience reads the King James translation of this famous text. It reads, trumpet scattering sounds of wonder, rending sepulchres. But as the mighty brass chords thunder forth with that legendary Jacobs bass tuba foundation, King James is discarded, and all in the hall hear the sounds not as trumpet mirum, but unquestionably tuba mirum, perhaps even Jacob tuba mirum. For decades, in this and other concert environments, our emotions and spirits have been momentarily lifted from the dust of the earth to another plane because of that sound, Jake's sound. And now, in perpetuity, it's our sound. Jake taught his students that the tuba was just a cold chunk of metal. He often would say, this has no brain, it has no spirit, it has no sound, it has no feeling. It was our responsibility to breathe into it, to bring it into life. And through that idealized sound that he taught us, we would learn to embrace it in our inner ear and nurture it in our inner soul. And through that sound, constantly strive to touch in others that special magic that music and the tuba had touched in our own lives. First and foremost, Jake was a teacher, not a tuba teacher, but the consummate educator. The meaning of life is to be found in our passions, or it could be found nowhere. Jake's passions were his family, his music, his teaching, and his students. As one of his colleagues recently noted, this man was a great natural teacher who could have probably taught anything he wanted to, but he just happened to be a wind specialist. He's the kind of legendary teacher that Franz Liszt was for pianists of the 19th century. Jake's worldwide sphere of activity brought him a wealth of pupils and an ever-growing international reputation. His precepts became circulated throughout the classical world. The relationship between the brain, the body, and the system of nerves were emphasized, as was the necessity for maintaining a lyrical sound. But those of us who knew Jake realized that all of these were secondary to his desire to help us develop as fully functioning human beings. Yes, our chops were important, and Jake's techniques to improve our breathing and flow efficiency were legendary. But when you studied with Jake, you came to realize that through his weekly assignments of etudes, of solos, of excerpts that helped develop our musicianship and artistry, he was ultimately there to develop our soul, our spirit, and our intellect. It's almost impossible for me to avoid sharing a few of his most repeated axioms. I believe you agree with me that though they're equally valuable for setting a better embouchure or breathing better, they also help set one's life's goal, which actually was one of his major accomplishments with his students. He'd often say, make each note worth $500, not $5. Remove conflict. Sneak in the back door of problems. The important thing is not what you sound like, it's what you want to sound like. Be a storyteller in sound. Express emotion in music. Play to feel better. Think like a child so simplicity comes through your playing. Practice the beauty of sound. The norm is lyric playing, the love song or bel canto, but be the great player who maintains a lyric sound at all speeds. Start with bad sounds and make them into good ones. Silence cannot improve. I was stunned when I learned of Jake's passing. It was just a few months ago when I sat in Regenstein Hall at Northwestern University campus, listening and watching him weave his magic once again with students enrolled in his yearly summer master classes. In the audience were dozens of young professionals, many experiencing this remarkable man for the very first time, but most were like me, experienced with Jake's pedagogy, but wanting to be there for another shot of his wisdom, his advice, and his love. But with Jake's passing, we now think that we need to deal with words. But we are all slaves of words. All too often, they're all we have to express those wordless feelings that fill our minds and our hearts. Yes, words are all we have, and yet at times such as this, they simply are not enough. With Jake's passing, words are all I have to provide to express my profound sense of loss. As Arnold Jacobs was a man who lived a life worthy of respect, so we shall always respect his memory, as he was a man of honor who brought honor and dignity, civility and professionalism to every situation he entered. So we honor his name. He was truly a gentle man. As he was entirely devoted to his wife, Gisela, and his son, Dallas, we honor his commitment to family and praise him for being a model of dedication to family and to family values. As he was the consummate teacher, we are inspired by his example to be more dedicated to the challenge of teaching and learning ourselves. As he was a man who touched our lives and left us better for the association, so his passing touches us now and leaves a void in our lives, a void that may close with time, but one that can never be made completely whole. Ray Still, my colleague on the Northwestern faculty and the legendary former principal, oboist of the CSO, stated most sincerely, Arnold Jacobs is simply God's gift to wind musicians everywhere, and I hope he lives forever. There are those of us in the universe of art today who may feel that he is gone, but looking around and remembering his beautiful sounds with our inner ears, there are many more of us who are certain that he will live forever. Arnold Jacobs' artistry and teaching leave us who carry on after him better musicians, better educators, but most importantly, better human beings. I speak for hundreds of his students, Gisela, and I pledge to you that we stand as living memorials to Jake as we continue to strive for the standards that he established. Mr. Jacobs, we will never forget you. The world cannot help to be a better place because you were once among us. Jake, you're loved. Jake, you're missed. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to make a long speech. I'm sure you've heard everything that there is to be said. Some of you may have been here when we played tribute to Arnold Jacobs a few months ago at a symphony concert, and so please forgive me if I repeat myself. But I just wanted to share with you, since we are all here, not only for the same purpose, to celebrate Arnold Jacobs' life in music and what he represented for music in general, for Chicago more in particular, and for the brass even more particular. Since we're all here to share not only this celebration for the same purpose, but with the same feelings, I wanted to share with you, in a few words only, a very personal experience that I had with him. It was many, many years ago. I was very, very young, and I was asked to conduct the Vaughan Williams tuba concerto with Arnold Jacobs as a soloist. Now, the Arnold Jacobs tuba concerto, I'm sure this may surprise you, is not exactly one of the pieces in my repertoire that I have done so often in my life. In fact, I had never heard the piece. In fact, I didn't even know it existed. But, being a very serious young man as I was in those days, I of course took the trouble and the interest to learn the piece as well as I could. And I must say, I then met with Arnold Jacobs with a slight feeling of trepidation. After all, this was really his piece, this was really his instrument piece, something that he knew all his life, you know, and who am I and what am I doing all this for? And I must tell you, he was of such, not only such clarity of musical concepts, everything that he explained to me, how he thought the piece should go, and how he thought this and that other detail should happen in the music. But he did that with such charm and with such elegance that I very quickly forgot my trepidation. And I always remained very grateful to him, first of all, for the many hours of really quite extraordinary music making that I had with him sitting in the old hall somewhere around there, but also for having been so generous and so charming to basically totally, can't say totally unknown because I would not have been here, but you know what I mean. I was really, you know, and he treated me really as an equal when I certainly was very far from being that. And for this, I shall always remember him with great, great joy. Thank you very much.